Hello, Spiral Out Podcast listeners. Big news for the podcast. Big news. This podcast has got its first official sponsor. Yes, somebody sponsored this podcast. Drum roll, please. Head on over to rockabilia.com. It's the coolest place on the internet to get all your officially licensed music merch. That's right, officially licensed. You can get Tool shirts. You could get a Perfect Circle hoodie, a Deftone shirt. You could get a Metallica towel. You could get a Sleep Token sculpture, 9-inch nails pins. You can turn your whole house into a music museum. So head on over to rockabilia.com and use the promo code SPIRALOUT to get 10% off your order. Again, rockabilia.com, promo code SPIRALOUT. The podcast is honored to partner with Rockabilia. We are excited for the future. We are excited about new episodes. So thank you for listening. Enjoy this week's episode with Mark Dean Veca. What an amazing guy that is. This is probably the best episode I've ever recorded, hands down. I know I say that a lot when I record episodes, but every time I talk to somebody new, it's just so interesting and informative, and it just kind of tickles my fancy. So enjoy the episode. Again, rockabilia.com, promo code SPIRALOUT to get your Metallica t-shirt or your Tool shirt or a AC/DC towel or a Beatles blanket. They have a ton of cool stuff. I bought a Deftones poster the other day. And again, official tour poster. So, rockabilia.com. Thank you for listening. Spiral out.
This is Harry Man back, Francesco from Rome, Italy. And you're listening to the Spiral Out podcast with your host, Chris West.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spiral Out Podcast. I'm your host, Chris West, and very excited for today's guest, Mark Dean Veca.
That's right.
Veca.
Mark Dean Veca. Yep.
And if you don't know who he is, then you probably live under a rock, especially if you're listening to this podcast. Mark is prolific. I can't even quantify how much art and work you have out there. I mean, it's just between installations, fine art, gig posters, sculptures, murals. I don't think there's a thing you haven't done.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. It's been really fun to mix things up and to try to just sort of stick my toe into, everything that comes along, and it keeps it interesting and fresh and inspiring.
And on that inspiring, I think probably one of my first questions would be what is something that you do to initiate inspiration on a regular basis?
Well, I just try to expose myself to as much culture as I can in every different way, high and low, and I've always loved, I've loved that idea of blurring the boundaries between high and low art, and that's been something that's been a sort of a pretty constant theme throughout my life and my career. And and I started out, really just being all about comics and all that kind of was would be considered lower forms of art. But then I think that at some point I realized that there really can be like a leveling out of that playing field, and that some of my favorite things are they just come from all these different worlds, and they all can sort of sit on a level plane for me.
So by low, and you said low and high art.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're talking maybe the contrast between pop culture art and like graffiti and like fine art?
Yeah, so that was something that, like, yeah, so for me in particular, yeah, sort of coming out of comics and illustration and all that kind of stuff, which is one of the ways I learned to draw when I was growing up, and didn't really have I wasn't really exposed to a lot of museums, galleries, and high art, fine art, kind of stuff as I was growing up. And when I went to art school, because I intended to be an illustrator, and because I didn't really know what fine art was. I just at that point I really didn't have a concept. I just knew that I loved to draw and paint, and I was very into these visual mediums, and I loved popular culture and comics and cartoons. And so when I went to art school, that's when I was exposed to the wider art world, the fine art world, and I really responded to a lot of that as well. And especially the stuff that I think already was kind of playing with those, working about breaking those boundaries, like pop art, like Warhol or Ed Ruscha, or a lot of the pop artists who were using popular culture to create pop art, and not just creating more popular culture.
So when you're picking a figure or a concept or a character from pop culture, something I've heard in different interviews or just read about you, and trying to figure this out myself, you can put different meanings into an established character. For example, the Monopoly guy,
Uh-huh.
or yeah, the Monopoly guy, or Scrooge McDuck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess my question, and I'm curious about how you do this, or what the process is, more of picking a character and then having an idea or a concept and molding those together, um,
Mm-hmm.
and saying something, that might be political or might be emotional.
Right.
What's the process when picking a character, and again, and how do you incorporate it into that emotion or that feeling or that piece of art?
Well, with the ones you just mentioned in particular, those are good examples. Because usually, like, whenever I would pick some subject matter from existing popular culture, like those characters, uh, it's not random, for sure. It's not
Yeah.
just, oh, that's cool, I like that, or this would be popular or something. It's never like that. Usually, there's a lot of thought goes into picking the right image. And so, yeah, I can use one of those or both of those characters as examples. That was a show. I did those paintings for a show uh, in LA in 2010 at a gallery called Western Project. And 2010, there was the whole financial upheaval that happened in 2008, and the economy in the whole world was just rocked by this whole economic meltdown. And so at that time, I was thinking about, the sort of the collapse of this American dream, so to speak. I mean, we really felt like there was so much that we all took for granted as far as, just the way the world worked, and the value of things, and just sort of the whole structure. Really, it was crazy, and how it all fell apart. And so those paintings were kind of addressing some of those issues. And so I wanted to choose both of those were sort of these cartoon, millionaires, right? Uncle Scrooge McDuck and the Monopoly Man. They kind of represented these millionaires, billionaires, whatever. Um, and so I was kind of showing those, and they're usually presented in these very squeaky clean kind of, uh, their original representations by Disney or Monopoly. They're just these very slick kind of sterile cartoons, very graphic in that way. And I just sort of decided to use those as a framework, as a found composition within which to just improvise all of my sort of organic biomorphic abstraction to sort of show them in a state of decay or de-evolution, or just sort of giving them this sort of grotesque treatment. And so yeah, after like, looking around at a lot of different images, choosing those for those reasons, but also because I felt like there was a personal connection for me, just because those are characters that I grew up with, that I had an affinity for, but I also felt had a wider kind of universal appeal to a lot of people. So it wasn't just my, it's not that they just appealed to me, but they appealed to a broad audience that would understand, what I was driving at. And the final thing being that they just, the forms and the shapes just visually that they're composed of were interesting to me, as far as for me to be able to work with and to come up with something in the end that I thought would make a good painting, because that was also, that's a huge part of it for me. It's got to have that appeal. It's got to be appealing for me to work with, and I want to make the kind of work that I want to see. So it's all of those things go into choosing an image to work with.
Well, in contrast, so those you said were in 2010, right?
That's right.
In contrast, you recently did like the Pringles guy, right?
Right.
So I guess the Scrooge McDuck and the Monopoly Man, again, you can go straight there. Money.
Yeah.
I don't want to say tyrannical, but they have an identity. I'm very curious about the Pringles guy and what that means in contrast of that I might not
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I could sort of relate that to like the body of work that I did directly after the financial ones, which was where I was using, these sort of mascots for corporate food, right? Like, the food companies, the products that are produced and sort of pushed on people through advertising to get them to eat all this really terrible stuff, right? Like, so I did a painting of Tony the Tiger from that series, and Charlie Tuna. It was sort of a comment about the some of the mercury in the tuna, the Kool-Aid, the Kool-Aid guy. So all these products that are sort of these mascots that are kind of directed towards kids in a lot of ways, and not that that was necessarily going through my head when I did the Pringles guy. Missed his name is one of my collectors was telling me his name.
Should I look it up real quick?
Julius Pringle was that character's
Is that
name.
correct? His name is
Yes,
Julius
yeah,
Pringle.
yeah. So yeah,
I can see
thanks
that.
to Keith Seals for that one. And so we, but actually, so after having just said all of that about this very methodical and very thoughtful way that I choose these images. That Mr. Pringle image in particular, um, my wife threw a birthday party for me last July, and we were, serving these cans of Pringles, and at the end of the night, there was that the seal from the top of the Pringles can was laying on the floor, and I just picked it up and said, "Oh, that would make an awesome painting." So I mean, so sometimes it's as simple as that. I guess I'm contradicting myself, saying like, oh, this all this it's it's not that it's not random per se, but anyway, well, maybe because of all of the above, when I saw that image, I thought, oh, this fits perfectly into what I've been doing. And so it was just, and it also had that personal level of being from that night. And I was working on new work for a show in Tokyo, and I just said, boom, okay, that's my next painting. And I'm also trying to keep myself more open lately to not overthinking everything and just sort of, when sort of, you can call it inspiration if you want to, but like when an idea or an idea or an image pops into your head, you don't have to, um, interrogate it to death. You can say, okay, that intuitively, I know as an artist that this is an image that I can use that would be interesting and that it might work. And you try it, and hopefully it does.
Well, that brings me to like humor, right? So I think there's a level of comedy in what you're doing in an artistic way. Again, with something like Tony the Tiger, and I'm wondering if that is intentional or is it just kind of a reflection of your personality. You seem like a fun guy.
Yeah, I'm all right. I've always loved humor in art, and so that's definitely true. I mentioned Ed Ruscha, I think, before, as someone who was an artist that, I mean, he's a huge contemporary artist, and has been, he started kind of becoming popular in the 60s and 70s. And I think, I always responded to a lot of the humor in his work. And I remember kind of what I was saying before, after when I was going to art school at Otis, and I was just discovering the fine art world. And I saw this retrospective of Ed Ruscha paintings that year. This is probably 1981 or 1982. And I was like, oh shit, this is art. This can be art. These paintings that I saw were just, they were so fun, and so much more than just fun, but worked on so many levels that really appealed to me. That's kind of what inspired me. I always, give him credit, if that's what you want to call it, for sort of opening up my eyes and pushing me in that direction, and kind of making me want to pursue fine art, as opposed to illustration.
Again, being new to this relatively, I
Mm-hmm.
this might be one of those dumb questions I was talking about. W- How do you tell the difference between something that's fine art and some like you said, maybe just like an illustration? Because if you, I've seen some of your like original drawings online or like on your page, and they go for a lot. And that's, is that technically an illustration or is it fine art?
Well, that is a good question, and I think that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, a lot of the boundaries have become more and more blurred, right?
Right?
Like, because when I was going to art school, a lot of the things that, you talk about decon and all this stuff, and a lot of these artists at decon, that stuff didn't exist back in the early 80s when I was going to art school. It's like you were either one or the other. So you either were a painter that you showed in galleries and museums, or a sculptor, whatever, or you an illustrator or some kind of a commercial artist, right? And I remember sort of like mid 80s, I think, is when, in LA especially, like when those boundaries started becoming blurred. I remember when illustrators, you know, would say, "Oh yeah, well, and this is my personal work." They would show like stuff that they didn't do for an assignment that was assigned to them by an art director, and it would be, you know, I mean, and a lot of times that was just, it was an illustration that was done without an art director, or just for themselves, for their portfolio or whatever. But I don't know. It it there became almost like another, a third, like a middle ground. Okay, but that's also when this whole high low thing started with Juxtapose and Robert Williams, and he was such a proponent of this idea of, breaking all these boundaries and saying that any of these lower forms could be fine art, high art, whatever. So tattoos, hot rod culture, graphics, t-shirt graphics, posters, all of these things. You know, why can't, who's to say what is fine art and what is not? And so that's and basically what it comes down to at this point is your intention, like what the artist says it is, and the context, where it's being seen or presented. For example, Robert Crumb, the lowest of the low back when he started, underground comics, Zap Comics in the '60s. I mean, what could be lower, really? One of my favorite artists, just a master draftsman and just a brilliant guy. And now his work is highly sought after, shown in museums all over the world. And so a lot has changed in that way. So there really is no way to define it except I think how the artist defines it and how the greater, world defines it.
Do you think it has something to also do with um like reputation? Like you have a great reputation and you have this universe of work. So you doing like an original sketch that's maybe not printed, like something one of one,
Mm-hmm.
then becomes extremely valuable, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's more of something that has to do with the art market, I guess,
Sure.
and about how and about my career and about how I have presented myself over the years and how I view myself and then how you hope that other people view you as well. I don't know. I mean, that's one
Yeah.
of those things that and I'm not saying that all the work is created equal per se. There's a lot of shit work in every category,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
like
In any medium,
yeah, any
music,
medium, and oh yeah,
video.
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So like you can go to some of these sort of lowbrow galleries or magazines or whatever, and see stuff that you think maybe isn't. Uh, a lot of people would say, oh, well, that's people from the fine art world might go say, oh, well, that's not that's not very good. But then you can go into any gallery, in Chelsea on any given day, and say the same thing, you know. So I
It almost
think,
reminds me
yeah,
of like top 40, right? Like
yeah,
a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't like it.
yeah, and it's really, and a lot of hey, obviously, there's a lot of pop music throughout the years that's a good example because there's so much that I mean I totally love and consider to be some of the
Yeah.
best art ever made, and some of it is just the absolute worst,
I'm
in
gonna
my
switch.
opinion.
Yeah.
Go
I'm gonna
ahead.
switch a little. Actually, I'm gonna go back a little
Oh,
about
sure.
characters. There seems to be a fascination with artists and this character Kang from the Pussifer poster. I see him everywhere. The Simpsons alien. He's on
Yeah,
everything. I'm just
yeah,
curious on why. And then we can talk a little bit about the Pussifer poster if you don't mind.
yeah. I mean, you know what? I don't know. I mean, I haven't really noticed that. I know, a lot of those characters and plenty of characters from all over other comics or animation. Yeah, you see a lot of them everywhere. I think it's Kang and Kodos were hilarious characters. I love
Right.
Matt Groening. I love The Simpsons, um, and I can definitely. I mean, if you want to talk about that Pussifer poster,
I would love to.
yeah. So I was listening to your other podcast with Jimbo, right?
Yeah.
Jimbo Phillips,
Yeah. Great
right?
guy.
Yeah, and he was talking about some of his stuff that he did with Pussifer posters, and it's sort of it's a similar kind of story where they asked me if I'd be interested in doing a poster, and then sort of gave me these guidelines about what kind of imagery they were looking for, what kind of flavor they were looking for in the poster. So, which is kind of nice in a way, in that it narrows things down, because they weren't, it was broad enough, and I, just to reiterate, it was this idea of, they wanted something to do with aliens or Men in Black or conspiracy theories, or, there was that kind of thing that they wanted for the poster. So my job then is to sort of say, okay, well, where does what they want overlap with what I do and what I want? So it was kind of like looking around. Like I once again, I love this idea of taking a found object out of popular culture that I have a connection to, that maybe other people have a connection to as well, and then using that as a structure or a form within which to improvise all of my line work. And so I looked around and tried to find different, aliens that were out there that
Were,
I could work with.
were there any contenders? Were there any like runner-ups?
Yeah, I was just trying to think what there was. Yeah, I mean, there was probably like, there was one guy, I think well, there was the guy from, I don't even know their names. There was the character from Warner Brothers who was like Marvin the Martian,
Right?
probably, or like the Flintstones. I don't know, had like this other guy, and
Oh yeah, the little
uh,
guy.
yeah, like I don't know, the Great Wazoo or something,
Yeah,
and
who also
you
was
know,
in Jetsons, I think.
in what?
Wasn't he in the Jetsons as well?
Yeah, yeah, maybe it was the Jetsons. Yeah, but maybe both. But
I think he went to both.
yeah, and so, but you try to look around, and then then it becomes okay about like all of the other things that I mentioned about the shapes and the forms and what you know what it might look like, and so yeah. But anyway, so I settled on Kang, and I thought, okay, this will make a killer poster, and that's kind of then it's basically taking it and then pretty much making a straight up drawing as if I wasn't doing a poster, just doing a black and white ink on paper drawing of Kang, and then sort of turning that into a poster with the text and all of that.
What I'm curious is you seem to, and I know you've been asked about this a bunch, and I've explained toil de joie, right?
Yeah, toile de jouy.
Toile de G,
Toile de jouy. So toile is a toile
cloth,
means
right?
cloth or fabric,
Yeah.
right? And jouy is a town in France where it was made popular in like the 18th century, like
Yeah.
Marie Antoinette kind
I
of
looked,
days. Yeah.
I looked up a bunch of it,
Okay, cool.
and got a little bit of history on it. But this pattern style that you do, which is
Hmm.
again this French word that I'll mess up a billion times. You seem to be able to create anything out of it. I'm wondering if you do like the outline first and then kind of figure out how to incorporate these strong lines and uh, this pattern into literally anything, like a gun, Tony the Tiger, Kang. I mean, Ronald McDonald, Batman.
Well, yeah, well, actually, so there's that you're kind of talking about two separate things.
Oh, fair enough. Please school
Yeah,
me.
yeah. No, no, no. It's just like so, the pattern, toile de jouy, it's this textile pattern from 18th century France, right? And so the story behind that is that I discovered that on my mother-in-law's bathroom wall, her wallpaper, and I just was fascinated by it, and I just loved the intricacy and the draftsmanship and the way it repeated. And I was like, wow, I really got to do something with this. Like, I don't know what, but there's something there for me that's just really fascinating me, and that's kind of what, that's, they call it inspiration, I guess. But I ended up just taking a photo of it. And then when I got back home, projecting that pattern up onto a large sheet of paper, about 40 by 60 inches, and just blocking in the basic pattern, none of the imagery, none of the detail, just like the pattern itself, the big shapes. And then I just jumped in with at that time just a brush and some acrylic, I think, paint. And I had no idea where I was going or what I was doing with this at all. And I just started in doing probably some abstraction, just some abstract lines and forms and shapes. But in those, in the toile de jouy patterns, that existed, you know, back in the day, they were made up of imagery, usually images of the countryside or mythology or history. They were recognizable images within them. And so what I would do is I would do all my sort of abstract areas, but then I would insert something, very faithfully rendered in my style, images from popular culture, once again, from album covers, advertising, comics. I tried to really be diverse and balanced in a way. Logos, just like tried to pick a lot of different things that's either sometimes were very connected thematically or just completely diverse. But it really opened up a new way for me to work, which was really just kind of blew me away. It was like, oh my God, thank you. And I feel like I have like so much freedom to do whatever I want to, whatever I feel like. And it was very much like going back to, what really got me started drawing in the first place, back when I was, a kid, and just sort of having fun and just doing what I loved, and not being so precious about all of it. So that was the toile de jouy. I mean, that was the toile works, in and of themselves.
Sure.
Later on, I kind of flipped it on its head in a way, and I would start with the found object, which would be the Tony the tiger, and then do all of my improvisation within that figure, usually with a very uh, minimal background. Um, so those works would not be considered toile de jouy, because there's no overall pattern. That's all. It's just a
Gotcha.
minor distinction, but I guess an important one.
Agreed. So again, what you're trying to tell me is you found this style with the toile de vie,
Mm-hmm.
and then, like I said, you flipped it and kind of created your own style that you could use with characters and throughout your whole art. You kind of, I don't know the word. Um, Again, you found your identity after playing with the 18th century pattern.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's true. Yeah, I mean, I remember when the first one I did was, and also, I got to say that this it also came out of one of my collaborations with another artist, Cause. Are you familiar with Cause?
No, but I'm gonna write it down.
Okay, yeah, okay. He's a big artist, Kaws. He's started out as a street artist, and now he's like kind of dominating kind of a lot of the art world. Um, but like over my shoulder here, this
Mhm.
skeleton here, that's the piece that I did in collaboration with Cause back in 2006 or something. I don't know. But when so I did some t-shirt. He had a company called Original Fake, and they were doing t-shirts. And so he asked me if I wanted to collaborate and take some of his characters and give them my treatment in a way. So I did some of those, and then I realized, okay, this is something that I could. Uh, this is interesting. I just said, "What? This is interesting. This is like a new way for me to work, to do my work, but not have it necessarily tied to this overall pattern." And the timing was really good because I was getting a little tired of doing those patterns. I mean, they were very successful for me, and I got a lot of attention from them and sales, and that was great. But after doing them for a few years, I was like, okay, what's next? And so this was kind of the next step in the evolution, was to sort of take these figures and isolate them and give them the treatment. And I've gone back and forth. I always say there's no harm in circling back and pulling things out of things that ways of working that maybe I had given up in the past. I'm always down to sort of mine my own history for imagery and ideas, and yeah, I continue to do that.
So what do you think draws you? Sorry, what do you think draws you into this particular style with the heavy line work and intricate patterns? What do you think it is about it that resonates with you?
Well, one of the ways that I learned to draw was from comic books. So I was very into Mad Magazine as a little kid, as well as other, like, Archie comics and superheroes in DC and Marvel and stuff like that. But Mad Magazine for sure. And I would copy as a kid. I would just copy out of Mad Magazine, and then later on, like in high school, got into underground comics. Zippy the Pinhead, Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, stuff like that. Artists like Bill Griffith and Gilbert Shelton. And so I was way into that stuff, and I would just copy. And so I just learned I learned to draw that way, and I love that kind of drawing. I love the simplicity of that kind of line work. How you can take in a few simple lines create form and shape and depth and space. And I think also for me, I think growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 60s and 70s during that sort of psychedelic period, um, there was definitely like a very ornate sensibility to that, which also kind of related to, this sort of 18th century French style. A lot of the, sort of Baroque or Rococo kind of, uh, poster art. I mean, a lot of it is also, I guess, Art Nouveau, but that's similar, I think. I think a lot of the psychedelic rock posters and albums, those were all big influences on me, just my sort of visual education.
I guess a better question might be is how did you recognize, like, again, you're figuring this out as a young artist. At some point it had to click, like, oh, I need to go this way, in this direction, with what I'm doing right now. Was there a moment? Was there a reaction from people that motivated you to keep going in this unique direction? Because it seems very unique to me. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, I can just a few things pop into my head. So, I mean, in the very beginning, just sort of my whole identity as being an artist was, in the second grade, when I would copy something out of a comic or something out of a magazine, and the other kids would say, "Ooh, you're a good artist." And I'd look around and say, "Really? What? I am." But it was like, so it felt good. You were getting that positive reinforcement. So
sure.
I keep doing it, right? This was something that set me apart, that people responded to, that. So there was that, and then so that was, anytime you get that positive feedback, it just kind of makes you want to keep going and do more. And then I know that another thing that comes to mind with, I had another professor in art school, John Mandel, when I was, I think, a junior at Otis. Yeah. And I brought in, I remember one week I brought in some drawings and for this critique, and they were like, "Yeah, well, I don't know what you're doing. What is this? What is this all about? Like, why are you doing this?" And I don't know. And then the next week I brought in these very gestural, sort of heavy line, scribbly kind of autobiographical drawings. And he kind of went nuts for him. He was like, I challenge anyone to say that these aren't great. And, hey, once again, that made me feel really good. And that was like, okay. So he was definitely, somebody who really pushed me on a certain path, and a lot of that work got a lot of attention, positive attention from people. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a thing where you just do things and to see where they go, you know, for yourself, like how successful you think they are, how other people respond to them. I mean, you can never go and try to make work to please people. It never works. But it's great when what you want to do lines up with what people want to see. I mean, I think that way, you get to keep doing it.
Yeah. And you get to live like how you want to live.
Yeah, I mean, if you're lucky, you can. That's the whole point, right? It's sort of like if you're lucky, you get to keep making it. You get to keep going, and that's all I ever wanted. That's all I ever asked for. The goal that I set for myself was really just to be a working artist, which I thought was, a really, uh, a kind of a lofty goal in a way. And in some ways it is. I know there's a lot of people, there's all these statistics that say how many people start out and how many fall by the wayside. And
I think
I
like
think that,
3%
hmm?
is like, I think 3% is usually like the given metric on
Yeah,
who becomes
something like that.
successful in something like media or art or acting.
Yeah.
It's usually like 3%.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I mean, that's probably on the high end, but
You're not wrong.
it's just, but it's, because over the years, yeah, people, and I get it. I totally get it. We've all had those feelings over the years of, wow, you know, do I want to, can I keep going? Do I want to keep going? It's hard. And then, but there's nothing else that I, you know, would rather do. There's nothing else that I want to do. I don't know if there's anything else I can do,
Well,
but it's,
I mean, that resonates with me in the podcast. I mean, again, I say this over and over. I use this podcast as a learning opportunity. Again, I'm trying. I've never considered myself to be creative. Uh, More of a technician, even though I've played music. I make short films. It just seemed very logical for me and technical. And now getting into poster art and just art in general, it has sparked something of like, okay, what does it mean to be creative? What does it mean to be an artist? And how do I pursue something maybe not technical but creative? And I'm very curious when I'm talking to artists on what they think it means to be a creative or an artist, and the difference, I guess, between doing something that's technically good and doing something that's creative.
mm, yeah. I mean, that's a tough one, but
Sorry.
yeah, no, but no, it's I don't know. I mean, because I mean, I think a lot of those terms are hard to define, and
For sure, for sure.
I mean,
Well, I
yeah.
guess the question for you would be: is do you consider yourself to be a creative?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm very curious about this concept that you were talking about before of chaos and order,
Mm,
and um, the one I think recently that I saw that really portrays this is the ornamental illness stuff that
hmm.
you just started posting or is just coming out? Because it seems at first glance you're like, wow, that's really chaotic, but then you really look at it and it's very symmetrical and detailed. And there's four of them or five of them, right?
Oh, okay. So you're talking about, yeah, the the black and white prints that are up on my
Yeah,
site right
yeah.
now.
What are
Okay.
they? The liar, tear, fur, and o.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it was. So that's layer, tear, fur, and O,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and it's all right. No, 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 and actually, so that's those are new prints that I did with at a residency at the space program in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and they are all taken from drawings that I did over 20 years ago. Um,
Oh
and they're
wow.
once again, those are very. And I also have some of the TWDE drawings up there too. Some of prints that I made from those very first TWDE drawings back in 2001 or so, 2002. And so, yeah, I did those as sort of a 20th anniversary commemoration of those. Um, but yeah, so those are very similar in the way that I'm just sort of using this found structure and improvising upon the structure, and it's still in that same realm, 18th century French decorative arts that I really love. Um,
I guess the original question is again
yeah,
balancing the chaos
yeah,
and order. Um,
yeah, and well, that's kind of the thing. It's like that's a really cool way to solve that problem in a way, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, here's the structure. It's pre-existing structure so that I don't have to think really uh, about it sort of takes that part out of the equation for me. Like I have my structure, and within that I am free to do whatever I want, anything I want, and not be burdened by, well, how is this going to look in the end? Is it all going to to be balanced or structured or ordered? That's built into it. And so that's what I was saying before about like giving me that freedom and and just sort of opening up so many possibilities. And I think that's been the case with a lot of the work that I do. I mean, I like to have, whether it's the found structure of the pattern or a character, or in the case of some of the installation work that I've done, that structure is literally provided by the architecture. So you walk into a room, and the architecture speaks to me and dictates to me what I'm going to do to the room as far as painting this mural. It kind of dictates to me what the composition is going to be, as opposed to a blank canvas, rectangle, square, whatever. That the possibilities are endless, right? So I having these sort of obstacles or these restraints frees me up in a lot of ways, rather than saying you can do anything you want. So that's too overwhelming for me. Like, I don't like having that. I need to sort of set boundaries in some ways for myself in order to free myself.
yeah,
Kind of.
you're setting boundaries so that you can improvise and kind of go crazy within these boundaries.
Exactly. And kind of like bringing it back to what you bring it back to music a little bit, right? So like
I was thinking the
you
same
have
thing.
every note imaginable, but if you have a scale that you're working within, then you have that structure, right? Or if you have every color in the world to work with, well, it's nice if you can limit your palette to a certain number or certain colors that work together.
I almost see it as and I might cut this out because I hope it translates, but it's almost like you're like the most detailed and uh improvisational remixer because you can take something again very very well known, and by improvising lines, and you can change it into anything you want. You can make it mean anything you want.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work has been, yes, they're definitely mashups, they're remixes, and I'm trying to take things from, well, once again, going back to high and low, a lot of those pattern pieces would include references to art history, you know, comics, like I said, logos, everything, but putting it all together. And some of them might have a very specific goal in mind or theme, but some of them is just like, well, let's put all these things together and see what happens.
Yeah, let's just make it rad.
Yeah, and no matter what, whatever I think it says or means is kind of irrelevant, because everyone's going to have their own
Yeah.
interpretation.
And therein lies the beauty in art, right?
Yeah.
Um, so again, when I go back to these big installations, does the presence of an audience influence how you're like, if you know that somebody's going to be walking through this, does that influence the improvisation, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the way I approach it to begin with, is, with that in mind. So you're dealing with this architecture, right? And you're thinking about it in terms of, visually, formally, how you're going to execute it or what you're going to do. But at the same time, you have to be thinking about the audience. And one of the things that always attracted me to doing those large scale pieces was to create something that would really kind of overwhelm the viewer, and just really blow them away. I really wanted to just create these things that were just sort of epic and monumental, and just would have just a lot going on visually, and create something that people could go into. I would like to transform the space from, your typical gallery space where you would walk in, look at each piece, and keep going. I wanted to transform it into a space where you could go and hang out. So I would put usually. I mean, been doing this forever. I would bring in these beanbag chairs as sculptural components that would sit on the floor. Sometimes the floor will be painted or have printed graphics on the floor. Beanbag chairs that would somehow be related in color to the walls, and the shapes of the beanbag chairs were also very similar, or echoed the shapes of my work, these sort of organic shapes. So you're transforming this kind of gallery space into a place where people can go and hang out and enjoy it and spend time with the work, and maybe sit on the beanbag chair to stare up at the ceiling that I painted, and um, so that in that way, yeah, it's very intentional. And you think about how someone walks into the room, where they might start to look at it, and how they see it as they walk through. There's a whole uh, sort of bunch of things that go along with doing that kind of site specific work, where you do think about all those aspects.
I kind of want to discuss vulnerability. Um, Being an artist, you have to put yourself in vulnerable positions, right? You're putting
Hmm.
emotions and ideas into a piece of work and then kind of putting it into the universe. Um, is there a specific piece that you felt was particularly exposing to you,
Hmm.
and were there any challenges putting it out?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know that definitely, yeah, that's kind of always the case, when you make something, that you feel strongly about for whatever reason, and then you put it out into the world. That is definitely, you're being vulnerable, and you're just kind of setting yourself up in a way. Um, and but no, I can't think of anything particular work, but it is something that that is in mind, that I do think about when I'm making work, and that I have to, yeah, sometimes you'll think, oh, is this, am I saying too much here? Am I exposing too much of myself here? And that's definitely the time when you have to say, fuck it. That's,
Right.
that's a sign that you should do it. you
I,
know,
and I
and I
guess,
can't let that stuff get in your head and stop you from doing anything.
I think the more important question for me personally that relates to this is I find it very abstract of how to put yourself into something. Like I can look at art and go, that's awesome, that's cool. I see what that means, but to sit there and go, how do I put me into this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is just kind of beyond me,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I'm asking advice.
Yeah, I mean that is the trick. I mean that really is the trick, and I think that comes from just doing a lot of work and kind of going back to what I was saying about being in art school and coming in one week with this work that was just like kind of went over like a lead balloon. I mean, even though there was nothing wrong with it, but then the next week doing something that was really unique to me. And that's kind of what I learned in that class actually was, make the work that only you can do, and that's kind of what I've always tried to do. Um, and it just comes from doing it. And in fact, I can think of other times, actually it was when I first moved to New York and I was kind of trying to reinvent myself in a way, or reinvent my work and break out of maybe the work that I had been doing just after I got out of art school. And it just came down to sitting down and doing like a lot of automatic drawing, just letting anything and everything come out, and then trying to be careful enough to notice when something came out that was interesting or that captured something for me that spoke to me, even if I didn't know why. So I remember that very specifically, and kind of latching onto that, and then um, exploring that farther.
Do you find that the act of creating is more significant than the finished product, or the other way around?
Hmm. Well, that's a good one because I love making the work. Uh,
But the reward is great too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was something because I go back and forth. I think it's like sometimes it's like it's really about the finished product, man, and I love to have that piece when it's done. But I don't know. Maybe as I've gotten older as well, I feel like there's nowhere I'd rather be than just really involved in making work and really getting involved and lost in making a painting, a drawing. That's the best. And so yeah, I wouldn't want to lose that, right? Like I wouldn't want to say, okay, well if you had your choice and you could just snap your fingers and the work was done, that would definitely not be. Uh, I wouldn't value that as much. So yeah, I'd have to say making it is the thing.
This might be a weird question, but I have this fantasy that when you're looking at stuff and you're maybe walking around or hiking or just living your life, you kind of see things in this pattern that you draw in, or can look at an object and go, okay, this is how I would this is how I would draw a camera, or this is how I would draw a microphone, or I don't know, it's kind of ridiculous, but is that in there somewhere?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, you're always seeing things, and then like, uh,
You're like, let me draw
it's
this
kind.
fridge real quick with these lines here and do these intestinal looking whatnot. But
Yeah, it's kind of well. One thing that I can think of in particular was there was a. It kind of goes back to the Mr. Pringle thing, right? So it's
oh,
very similar.
exactly,
It's
exactly,
yeah, it's
yeah.
very similar in that way. You just see something and oh, boom. But there was another time where I was driving down the street and there was this banner outside of this little restaurant on the corner. It just said breakfast burritos, and I thought that's a painting right there. That's a boom. I'm going to take that and make a painting, and kind of what I did was took that literally took that. I took a photo of the sign maybe, and I,
Is that out
I
there
used,
somewhere?
sorry,
Is that painting
sorry.
out there somewhere?
Oh, well, yeah, it is. Yeah. But it was at that time I was really interested in kind of defining and articulating all the spaces in between the letters, right? So the negative spaces in between the letters would become the forms, and then the letters themselves would become like there was an atmosphere in the background. So it was just sort of once again a way of creating a structure within which to improvise, and that goes back also, I think, to music as well, to sort of like improvising on structure, chord structure or something.
I don't have too many more questions, but
Mhm.
um, I mean, I could go all day, but I don't want to take that much more of your
Mhm.
time. But there seems to be a definite thread of like continuity in your work, almost like a universe, um, where all of this stuff kind of lives. Um, have you ever thought of translating that into some type of animation or like video or anything other than sculptures and paintings and drawings?
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me about that over the years, and people have suggested that, but it's like I just wouldn't even know where to begin, and that's just not something that I feel like I could do, you know. So that's just never. I don't know. I think that's something that is just beyond me technically, so I just never pursued it.
Um, so again, having such a prolific and long career with somebody with your stature, does the word legacy come in where you're like trying to think of your work as a whole and like a lasting impression that you will continue to do, or in turn, like how do you keep evolving?
Well, as far as legacy goes, like that's definitely something I don't think about and don't really care about. Um, I'm just sort of making my work for here and now, and if it lasts, that's great. But it's not like that's not necessarily the goal. And as far as evolving, yeah, I mean that's been all the thing. It's like over the years, it's interesting because there have been times where I've gotten bored with certain thing I'm doing, and it just it's kind of impossible to sort of make to evolve without it happening just naturally, right? So hopefully things just evolve on their own, kind of naturally and slowly. Sometimes it will look like a big jump, especially to me. Sometimes I feel like it's a big jump. Other people might think it's not, but it's just a matter of doing what you find interesting at the time. And like I said before, it's fine to circle back, grab something from the past, bring it forward, see how that works now with what I'm doing now. Or
What are you doing now? What are you doing right now? What is something that's you've been working on that you're allowed to share?
well, I did a lot over the summer for the show that I had in Tokyo, which was in October, November. So I did a lot of paintings and stuff for that show, and that was kind of a big push. And then we had the show. It was great, really fun to go for a couple of weeks and come back. And then I got really sick for a couple of weeks, and
Oh
then it
no.
was well, I don't, yeah, it was just whatever. And then it was Thanksgiving, and then and then it was decon,
Yeah.
and then it was Christmas, and then it's
Yeah.
just like I don't know, the whole
I
thing
had the
between,
same type of thing.
yeah, a whole like between Thanksgiving and New Year's is a really tough time for me to like make work. And I also threw decon in there,
And you have a
which
family and
yeah,
yada yada. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like, and then I got, then so after New Year's, then New Year's, basically, my wife and I got COVID the day New Year's Day,
I got
so
it on Christmas.
you got it at Christmas,
Yeah, like
yeah.
right on Christmas, I
Oh,
got
okay,
COVID.
yeah. yeah. So that kind of, so then like today is the first day that I tested negative.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah. So it took like 2 weeks. I mean, not that I was feeling bad the whole time, but and it was pretty mild. I got pretty lucky, but I'm really really dying to get back to just being like getting in the studio. There's nothing better for me than like just being in the studio every day, working all day, picking up the next day where I left off the day before. I love that, but it's so hard for me to get into that groove. Once I get into that groove, I'm great. I can do it. When I get out of the groove, it's hard to get back in.
I completely
Uh,
understand.
yeah, and so today was kind of like the first day of like well maybe not today, but it's this week is kind of like okay, it's there's nothing else. I need to just like catch up on everything and then start some new work. I mean, I'm working. I've been working. I did a commission, when I was over the last couple of weeks. One of these, the stormtrooper helmet. I don't know if you ever,
Yeah,
all these objects I paint on. So that was
sure.
a commission. So I got that done. That's great. And then this other thing, I'll get it.
Oh, your camera follows you.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's the iPad. Yeah. So, this is in progress, but so I've been working on this.
And this is a
Uh,
commission?
this is just like I got this mannequin head at a flea market. Well, I just yeah, I found this at a flea market and about a year ago, and it's just been sitting in the corner. And it's kind of a crazy thing, but these objects that I paint, I only paint them during football season. And I sit there and I watch football, Monday night, Thursday night, whatever. And I sit in here in this room and I paint these objects. And so I did another one, a Bob's Big Boy that's up in the case over here, and then I did the Stormtrooper helmet, and then I had this sitting around. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to work on that while because I'm waiting for something else to come. I'm painting a Fender bass. I'm painting a Fender Precision bass coming up. Anyway, what's this? What do you have to show me there?
It's a blank. I've had this. It just reminded me. I've had this Batman head that's
Uh huh.
white for like 12 years just sitting around.
Oh, how funny. That's
And
cool.
yeah, but it
Well,
just reminded me of like,
yeah,
oh, I have this blank Batman
yeah,
head that I've had
yeah.
for literally over a decade.
Well, that's so funny because yeah, I mean that's something like that I would go and find at a flea market, and I would buy it and bring it home and paint
And
it,
doodle on it.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so like the Ronald McDonald over in the corner here, I found
Yeah.
that at the Rose Bowl flea market, and a lot of those other things, the smaller objects, the banks and things. But yeah, that started as a collector of mine in Taiwan wanted me to paint on these objects, these cause toys, and I kind of didn't really want to do it because it's hard to do to paint on these three-dimensional objects. But you know, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and so I did. And it turned. I was like, wow, this is kind of fun, and I like sitting here watching the game, doing this. So it's become something I do. I've been doing every year last for the last few years, every football season. It sounds so ridiculous, but
I don't think so at all.
in a way, yeah, it's like so I don't I'm not wasting my time, and it actually gets me to sit down and focus on something. It's kind of a nice.
If you don't mind, I would like to send you this as a gift for you to keep and paint in while you're watching football. You just have it.
All right.
No strings attached.
Well, I can't say for sure if I would paint it or not, but that's cool. Thank you.
If you get to it, you get to it.
All
But
right.
I feel like it's wasteful sitting on my shelf unpainted. So you might get something out of it.
Okay, cool.
I have another ridiculous question, and thank
Uh-huh.
you for sharing. Um, if you could have a conversation with any one of your characters in art, which one would it be that you've created?
Oh, oh wow. Well, it would have to be Popeye.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
now
Popeye has been my
just the
muse.
arm Popeye that you've done, or the full Popeye?
Well, let's give him a mouth. I don't know. No, Popeye was. It's funny because Popeye has been my muse for some reason. My brother and I. It's a memory of my brother and I used to come home from school, maybe when I was in. I wasn't like that little, but I was maybe actually seventh grade or something. I remember coming home from school, making a root beer float, sitting down in front of the TV and watching Popeye. And I mean, I've been watching Popeye all my life before that, and that character, there was something about his personality, his story, his persona, the whole thing that really resonated with me. So, yes, at one point I did, well, when I was talking about doing all that automatic drawing before, right? I sat down and I started doing all this automatic drawing, and Popeye's arm sort of became this character unto itself. And the other characters from Popeye, Bluto, and Olive, all the other characters kind of, they had their own sort of deconstructed, sort of self emerge. And I spent about 4 years or so almost exclusively working with that imagery. And so ever since then, anytime that I do have like a new idea of something that I want to try out, but I don't have a particular subject matter in mind, I just usually Popeye is kind of the go-to, just as far as let's see what would happen.
What would you say
He's
to Popeye?
uh, uh, that's I don't know. That's a good one.
I mean,
Think
I'm
about
trying to
that.
think of what I would say to Popeye. I'd probably ask him how he fits all that spinach in his pockets, but
Yeah, but yeah, yeah, yeah. So Popeye for sure, and you know, um, yeah, been my muse.
it's very interesting because it's like a level of nostalgia with he's just kind of been there through the creative process the whole time.
Yeah, and I don't know. For some, I guess I feel like it's a very sort of iconic, sort of archetypal story character. The little guy that gets bullied, and then he has these superpowers, and he wins the fight and gets the girl. So whatever that says about me, like
Yeah, no. Um, and I guess it would lead me to my last question. Um, again, being having such a extended career, I don't know if that's a good word, but a long career. I'm sure um your thoughts on how a person would be successful in this type of medium has changed. Uh, and again, I'll ask the question I'm sure you get asked after every one of these towards the end is what would be your advice to somebody just starting out, somebody who wants to quit, or somebody who's, you know, trying to do something similar of what you're doing?
yeah. Well, what was the first part of the question again?
I don't remember.
Okay, that's all right. So, but no, yeah, and I should have seen that question coming because yes, that is always the
It's on
question. And
every.
then,
Yeah, it's always the question at the end.
yeah, but I just was on this podcast the other day that hasn't come out yet, and I was prepared for that one because I had this poem that I read by my favorite poet, Charles Bukowski.
I love
Are you
Charles
familiar?
Bukowski.
Okay, so he
Yeah.
wrote this poem called Roll the Dice. So, what I'm going to say, my advice is to read that poem because I don't have it here to read to you.
Sure, sure, sure.
So, Roll the Dice, which is amazing. And it's about this exact sort of subject. And basically, the gist of it is
Just do it.
if you're, yes, exactly. If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. and it is really about just and part of some of the lines in it is do it, do it, do it, do it. In fact, I think that's where Nike got their "just do it" is from that poem.
Speaking of
But
Nike, you have some shoes, don't you?
sorry.
You've done some art on Nike shoes, haven't you? Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt. It just
yeah, no,
reminded
that's
me.
all right. No, yeah, I've collaborated with Nike on a bunch of stuff, mostly Nike snowboarding, but I've done, Mark Parker, who is was the CEO at Nike, was collecting a lot of my work, and we did some projects together, and that was great. It was always great to work with Nike. Yeah,
Again, I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
I just
but
remember
no,
seeing your Nike shoes.
yeah. But
Just do it.
yeah, just do it. And then the other thing, actually, that I would say is there's a couple of books that I could totally recommend. I don't know if you've read. I think it's called The Creative Act. It's by Rick Rubin, the music producer, which is an incredible book. Like it blew me away. I listened to the audiobook like probably 8 times. Like I just love it. I just think that he's spot on about everything that we were just been talking about. And then there's another book by an art critic from New York called his name is Jerry Saltz, and I love the way he writes about artists and about how to be an artist. In fact, he wrote a book called How to Be an Artist, and he started out as an artist and he became a critic. At the age of about 40, I think. He never really studied any kind of writing, but he's Pulitzer Prize winning art critic. And I just love the way he writes about artists.
What's his name again?
Jerry Saltz, Saltz. So anyway, and then, so before I forget, on that other podcast, I forgot to thank everyone. So I just want to thank so many people, my wife, my parents for being so supportive as I was growing up, and supporting me and my work, and my wife being so understanding about all of this stuff. And there was definitely when we got married, there was no there was no guarantee of any kind of stability.
Yeah, you were broke.
Yeah, totally. So all of that, and my son and my friends, and all of the people who have given me, opportunities to show my work, and all of the people that have supported my work financially and collected my work. I mean, it would not be possible without any of them. So, I just wanted to say that on this podcast.
Last little tidbits. Is there a character you haven't used yet that you would like to use?
I don't think there's any one character lurking out there. It's usually more of it kind of goes with the time frame that I'm working. Something will pop up relative to that. So no, I can't say that there is.
And is there a band you haven't done art for yet that you would like to?
I remember you asked Jimbo this, or someone, and
I ask everybody.
no, you know what? I mean, Ween, I've done a couple of Ween posters, and Ween is really my favorite band right now that I listen to more than any other band. So I'm always psyched to do that. And it's funny, like a lot of the music I listen to is by bands that are just like old. So they're probably not even really, performing. But no, I mean, if I could do, like, if I could have done like a poster for Led Zeppelin or something, yeah, I would do that, right? But they're not around anymore. So
any hints at upcoming gig posters?
yeah, it's funny. I don't know if it's supposed to be secret or not. I remember back when I would do Primus posters, so they'd say, "Oh, well, don't keep it under your hat. Don't say." these latest ones, they haven't said that per se, but I don't know if I'm supposed to say. But I have a couple of posters coming up this spring. So I'll just leave it a
Would
mystery, I guess.
would you say they're happening between April 2nd and April 17th or
Let's
April
see.
24th?
Yeah, yeah, I could say that. Yeah,
Would you say
maybe
they're a
like
band?
maybe
Go ahead.
420 is one. There's one on 420.
Would it be a
Yeah,
band that you've already worked with?
yes.
One last question. Is it have anything to do with anybody's birthday?
Yes.
We'll leave it at
Okay.
that.
I didn't say anything.
You didn't say anything. I just asked some questions. Well, Mark,
Yeah.
it was such a pleasure. Hopefully, I didn't bore you with my questions. I thought it was super insightful and meaningful. Um, and as you thanked all of your family and friends and supporters, I thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, and it was really interesting and fun. I think it was a really good interview, and yeah, and I'm glad we had a chance to do it.
Yeah, me too. And thank you for giving me the time. And I don't know how fast your other podcast is coming out, but I have a feeling this will be out extremely soon.
All right. Well, you might beat him to the punch because I have
I
not heard.
probably will.
Okay.
I'm debating on not whether or not I'm going to put it out today.
Okay.
Uh, well, again, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing what else you come out with and following your art and career. And again, I appreciate your time.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. And I guess I should plug my Instagram at Mark
Yes,
Dean
yes,
Veca.
yes.
Yeah, at
Please,
Mark Dean
please do
Veca.
your plugs.
Okay, at Mark Dean Veca for Instagram. Mark Dean Veca Studio on Facebook. And those are the only ones that I really, my website, markdeanveca.com. So yeah, and and I do have those prints up on my web store, which you can find through my Instagram, the link in the bio.
I've yet to get a piece of your work. I should have got one at Decon, but I was so consumed with getting interviews and trying to do my work there. I didn't do much buying.
I
But
understand.
what
Yeah.
one day I will get a Mark Dean Veca.
Okay. Well, keep your eyes peeled. There will be
Thank you,
something
sir.
coming up pretty soon.
I'm going to end it.
Spiral Out Podcast is produced by me, your host, Chris West, edited by me, researched by me. Everything is pretty much just done by me. Go to our website, spiraloutpod.podbean.com. Follow us on Instagram at spiral_out_pod. Facebook, Spiral Out Podcast. And again, if you want to see some of the images associated with this episode, click the link in the show notes and it'll take you there. Again, thank you for listening. Spiral Out. Pod dismissed. Wait, that's another show.